Whatever your game is, I'll play it.
Hi, I'm Rodney Donahue, and today I'm going to talk about my 5 favorite episodes of Star Trek, the original series.
I have my reasons, and I'll make them clear to you. In my own good time.
Star Trek has had some great episodes. It has had some very bad episodes. But today I am only going to talk about my very favorite episodes, starting with number 5, Bread and Circuses.
For console, in some parts of the galaxy, I have seen forms of entertainment that makes this look like a folk thing.
The concept behind this episode is very simple.
What are we seeing? 20th century Rome?
What if Rome never fell? They did this a lot on Star Trek. The Nazi planet in Patterns of Force, the gangster planet in A Piece of the Action, those weird hippies in The Way to Eden.
At least defend yourself. I am defending myself.
The plot of this episode is fine. Kirk and crew investigate a ship that went missing and believe that its captain may be violating the Prime Directive, so they decide to pull him out.
What happened to your crew?
The captain actually put his crew into gladiator games in the midst of a Christian uprising. In the end, the captain saves Kirk, and the Christian slaves begin a revolt against Rome.
Caesar and Christ, they had them both.
This episode is one of my favorites for 5 reasons. Number 1, the character of Merrick, the captain of the survey vessel, is one of my favorite supporting characters in Star Trek.
Yes, it's me.
In this episode, we get to see Merrick's admiration for Kirk.
He commands not just a spaceship proconsul, but a starship. A very special vessel and crew.
We get to see his openness about betraying his crew to survive, and the accompanying shame. The guilt he feels for Kirk's men when they are forced to fight in the games, the same guilt that he felt for his own men.
Most of my men went the same way. I hoped I would feel it less with yours.
And his redemption, sacrificing himself for Kirk and company in order to make up for his past actions. Number 2, Kirk's cleverness. In this episode, Kirk passes a message through one of his captors.
Perhaps. Well, if I am a friend, and you don't tell him, do you really want to risk that?
He forms a ploy to overtake the jailers, and he spends a lot of time playing along with the proconsul.
I promise you, you will die easily, quickly.
I thank you.
Number 3, Spock's humor.
Oh, yes, you humans have that emotional need to express gratitude. You're welcome, I believe, is the correct response.
In this episode, he refers to McCoy's medical practice as trial and error.
Watching you, I assumed it was trial and error.
He continuously implores his fellow combatant to desist. And he chooses to save McCoy in the arena in order to help the Enterprise, regardless of what he thinks of McCoy's medical skills.
The loss of our ship's surgeon, whatever I may think of his relative skill, would mean a reduction in the efficiency of the Enterprise.
Number 4, this episode is a scathing indictment of reality television decades before reality TV was a thing. I remember the first time I watched this episode and I saw the little Roman TV show that they were doing, and I thought, oh no, Star Trek, no. But when I finished watching the episode, by the time I reached the live television studio, my opinion completely changed. I love the commentator in the booth above, the applause meter on the effects station. I love how the proconsul exclaims that Kirk's execution is going to be in full color.
Oh, we've preempted 15 minutes on the early show for you. in full color.
And number 5, I like how this episode shows Starfleet personnel excited to watch the spread of Christianity.
Wouldn't it be something to watch, to be a part of? To see it happen all over again.
This episode disguises the Christian slaves by calling them children of the sun. And immediately after this, they cut to a shot of the sun while Kirk and company are walking in order to throw off the audience.
May the blessings of the sun be upon you.
This is a wonderful counterbalance to Who Watches the Watchers, where the TNG writers and producers throw Christianity and anyone who believes in God under a pretty long bus. So it's nice that, at least in the 23rd century, Christianity was still something to be excited about.
It's the Son of God.
That was my only miscalculation.
My 4th favorite episode of Star Trek the Original Series is Whom Gods Destroy. Whom Gods Destroy is, no pun intended, the craziest episode of Star Trek. This episode has the best opening of Star Trek ever. The Federation hopes to end mental illness in the universe for all time.
A total of 15 incurably insane out of billions is not what I would call an excessive figure.
The concept for this episode is really simple. The inmates literally are running the asylum.
A guard, seeing what he thought was me in Garth's cell, released him.
The plot is not really important. The acting is what causes so many memorable moments, and so I'm going to spend my time talking about the 5 reasons that I think that Whom Gods Destroy is one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek.
I'm sorry, Lord Garth.
Number 1, William Shatner at his absolute best. This episode contains several of Kirk's best comebacks in all of Trek. My favorite is very early in the episode when Garth of Izar informs Kirk that "you will help me, of course." And Kirk brazenly agrees with, "Of course."
You will help me, of course.
Of course.
After leaving Kirk in a cell, Garth asks Kirk about his well-being, and Kirk lets him know that
I thank you for your concern. All in all, it's been rather restful.
Kirk expresses gratitude by saying, "Thank you, that's very magnanimous of you."
Oh, thank you. That's, very magnanimous of you.
I don't use magnanimous often enough. I should use it more.
The chatter of inferior weaklings wearies me.
And when Garth indicates Kirk could be a human sacrifice, Kirk's response is simply, "No, I wouldn't enjoy that at all."
You could serve as human sacrifice, for example.
No, I wouldn't enjoy that at all.
Number 2, Leonard Nimoy shines. In Whom Gods Destroy, Spock compares Marta's seductive dance to clumsy Vulcan children dancing in nurseries.
It's somewhat reminiscent of the dances that Vulcan children do in nursery school.
Spock correctly addresses his captor as Captain Garth, and when Garth furiously rejects that title, Spock simply responds,
Captain Garth.
Lord Garth.
As you wish. At any rate.
He doesn't acknowledge the title that Garth wants him to. He just says, "as you wish."
You must be aware of the fact that you are attempting to recreate the disaster which resulted in you becoming an inmate in this place.
Spock even puts down Captain Kirk by betting on Garth. He says, "I was waiting for a victor in the hand-to-hand struggle," which I assumed would be Captain Garth.
I was waiting for a victor in the hand-to-hand struggle, which I assumed would be Captain Garth.
There is a wonderful callback to this in Deep Space Nine's Blaze of Glory when Sisko thanks Eddington for shooting a Jem'Hadar, but Eddington claims he just shot the one standing, which he assumed would be the Jem'Hadar. He assumed that Sisko would lose in the way that Spock assumed that Kirk would lose the struggle with Garth.
You have sharp eyes.
Not really. I just waited to see which of you was knocked down first, and then I shot the one still standing.
Number 3. This episode audaciously utilizes commercial break music, but then refuses to cut to a commercial.
I gave him a sign.
It is a bit awkward, but Steve Einot pulls it off.
Peace mission! Politicians and weaklings!
Number 4. Steve Einot as Garth of Izar is the main reason I love Whom Gods Destroy.
Blast away, Captain. Can. You think I'm fool enough to give you a charged phaser?
His performance, in my opinion, is the most powerful and memorable of any guest star in Star Trek the original series.
Gentlemen, courtesy for the performer.
Garth's full title is Lord Garth, who leads the future Masters of the Universe.
I am Lord Garth, formerly of Izar, and I lead the future Masters of the Universe.
This episode is worth watching simply because Steve Einot crafted an amazing, insane character. My favorite Garth moment is when he chides Marta for claiming she wrote Shakespeare.
And summer's lease hath all...
You wrote that?!
Garth even has a coronation as Master of the Universe, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful performance and a wonderful, wonderful episode.
Yes. Oh, I know that even a real throne is no more than merely a chair, but the symbolism is important, don't you agree?
Number 5. Garth of Izar is healed, and all mental illness is cured forever.
You have advanced aromatic syndrome. It's possible that all of this is in your mind.
Except Bendai syndrome.
Illogical! 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 Illogical!
And whatever Tam Elbrun has.
Oh, Data, don't waste time.
And whatever Barclay has.
In through the nose, out through the mouth.
But other than that, mental illness is cured for all time.
I see. Now we'll talk.
I'd assumed you needed help.
My third favorite episode of Star Trek the original series is A Taste of Armageddon. I think this episode is the ultimate classic Trek episode.
We get our communicators back and try and contact the ship.
In this episode, Kirk and Spock beam down to a planet where war is fought solely by computers.
Computers, Captain. They fight their war with computers, totally.
People willingly enter disintegration chambers if they are registered as casualties in order to preserve their planet's advanced culture. In the end, Kirk destroys the planet's computer, forcing the society to either make peace with its adversary or fight in an actual war.
You mean to tell me your people just walk into a disintegration machine when they're told to?
This episode is all about the absolute necessity of violence in war. The Armenians had no need to end their war because they made war clean and easy. We get to watch the away team witness this clean and easy disintegration process. People enter and they don't come out. So what stands out in A Taste of Armageddon?
There is a certain scientific logic about it.
I'm glad you approve.
Spock is believed to approve of what the Armenians are doing, but Spock says,
I do not approve. I understand.
I love how this very advanced planet has regular 60s furniture and shag rugs. Montgomery Scott is a great commander. He immediately recognizes the ruse to trick the crew into beaming down.
Well, now, what do you think of that?
I don't know.
Well, I do.
And he is willing to risk prison to save the ship and Kirk.
I can't have you sent to a penal colony for this. That you can, sir. But I won't lower the screens.
Throughout this episode, Kirk is referred to as a barbarian.
You are a barbarian.
I.
But in truth, Kirk is simply a great military tactician. He anticipates treachery, utilizes strategy, and overpowers 4 guards ill-equipped to handle the top commander in Starfleet. In the end, Kirk gives a Picard speech.
You've made it neat and painless. So neat and painless, you've had no reason to stop it.
And he performs a Picard action. Kirk destroys the Amenian computer, forcing diplomacy. Kirk the Barbarian points out, "We're not going to kill today."
Put an end to it. Make peace.
I'm honestly surprised how little I have to say about this episode, considering how great it is. I composed 3 pages of notes, but it really is the message that war is messy, and the steps that Kirk takes to save not only his ship and crew, but also the Amenians, is really why A Taste of Armageddon is an amazing, perfect episode of Star Trek, the original series.
That seems to frighten you.
Not every episode of Star Trek, the original series, is easy to watch. Some are downright difficult. In 2021, I made it a goal to finally watch every episode of the original series, and at times, certain episodes made this a real challenge.
Well, I'm waiting for you, Jimmy boy.
Finnegan.
Whenever I needed help getting back into Star Trek, I relied on one episode to get me back into it. And that episode is my second favorite episode of the original series, Mirror, Mirror.
There's a whole galaxy gone crazy. What kind of a uniform is this?
The concept of this episode is very simple. Everything is the same, but different.
The ship is subtly altered physically. Behavior and discipline has become brutal, savage.
What if the Enterprise operated not in a federation, but in an empire?
We will level your planet and take what we want.
Kirk is captain of a violent enterprise committed to destruction and conquest.
Terror must be maintained or the Empire is doomed.
It's as if humanity took an unethical and inhumane route after obtaining warp drive.
They refuse the Empire. Command procedure dictates that we provide the customary example.
This episode is about how great and powerful the Federation and Starfleet are. They are mighty, but they are tempered by compassion, as demonstrated by Kirk's dealing with the Halkans.
You do have the might to force the crystals from us, of course. But we won't.
In our universe, Starfleet will allow the Halkans to live in peace. In the Mirror universe, the Empire will begin destroying cities in an attempt to force their will on planets with ethical codes.
Lock on to secondary city.
I see.
The computer provides Kirk with a cursory rundown of how terrible the mighty Enterprise could be in our universe.
First action, suppression of Gorlat uprising through destruction of rebel home planet.
Kirk assassinated his predecessor, suppressed a group of rebels, executed 5,000 people, and probably more, but Kirk does not want to hear it and shuts the computer off. We only get to see 75 seconds of Mirror Kirk interacting with Spock in our universe, but we see everything we need to see. He is angry, quick to judge, unable to adapt, and amenable to bribery.
You want credits? I'll give them to you. You'll be a rich man. A command of your own? I can swing that too.
Contrast this with our Kirk. Kirk is quickly able to adapt in the mirror universe, playing it cool and responding in kind. Kirk gives orders and expects them to be obeyed, such as ordering Scotty to the transporter pad, insisting that he will operate the controls.
Get to the transporter, Jim. You too, Uhura.
Jim!
That's an order, Scott.
Marlena recognizes Kirk's merciful nature, that he offered her freedom of choice.
I simply meant that you could be anything you want to be.
And unlike Mirror Kirk, our Kirk uses logic to convince Spock in the Mirror Universe to captain the Enterprise and spare the Hulkins by giving him an ally in Marlena and power through the Tantalus field.
In my cabin is a device that will make you invincible.
Indeed.
What will it be?
There is so much to say about how great Mirror Mirror really is.
The booth for this one, sir?
Yes, the booth. Carry on.
Kirk tries to play it cool, but he does not completely understand the universe. He makes a mistake and reveals where he will be.
I shall be in my quarters.
And Chekhov takes this rare opportunity to prepare an assassination for Kirk. Scott says, Mr. Sulu is security chief, like the ancient Gestapo.
Mr. Sulu is security chief, like the ancient Gestapo.
Surely no one remembered this line when Yar, Worf, Odo, Eddington, and Tuvok were brought in.
Mr. Worf, initiate a level 2 security alert all decks until further notice.
With all due respect, sir, I'm the security chief on the ship.
I love when Bones' "I'm a doctor" in this episode is immediately countered by Scotty's "now you're an engineer."
I'm a doctor, not an engineer.
No, you're an engineer.
Kirk's bravado is in full force in this episode. Even though he only has a few allies in this universe, he clearly tells Spock,
You would find me a formidable enemy.
I'm aware of that, Captain.
I know everyone loves Mirror Spock because of his goatee, but I'm very partial to Mirror Sulu. He easily moves from target to target, ready to obliterate cities simply because he's working that day. He monitors computer usage and Spock's communications. He plays games within games.
It's your play. I hope you succeed.
He also hopes that Spock assassinates Kirk before command orders him to do it because he is scared. He does not want to be one of Kirk's targets that disappears.
And you know how Captain Kirk's enemies have a habit of disappearing.
In my opinion, this is the best episode for Uhura. She starts the episode scared.
Captain, I'm...
Has the riskiest job distracting Sulu so Scotty and McCoy can finish their work. And at the end, when Marlena threatens Kirk, Uhura fully adapts to this universe and disarms her. For these reasons and many more, Mirror Mirror is my second favorite episode of Star Trek.
In every revolution, there's one man with a vision.
My favorite episode of Star Trek the Original Series is The Trouble with Tribbles. I could watch this episode every day. I have seen it more than any episode of TOS, and I love it just as much as the first time I saw it.
The what? What?
The Trouble with Tribbles prepares the audience for battle. They receive a distress call indicating near or total disaster.
It's called one emergency. That's a disaster call.
Instead, Kirk battles bureaucracy.
I am going to report fully to the proper authorities.
Diplomats.
I might also add that under the terms of the Organian Peace Treaty, you cannot refuse us.
Pets. Used car salesmen.
Captain Kirk. Friend Kirk.
And Jeopardy questions about grain.
Of course, I wouldn't expect you or Mr. Spock to know about such things, but quadrotriticale is a rather...
Quadrotriticale is a high-yield grain.
The plot of this episode revolves around a dispute between the Federation and the Klingons over the control of a planet. The power that can best create potential for the planet gets it, and the Federation is betting on a high-yield grain to put them over the top. While the station asks Kirk to defend the grain from the Klingons, small furry creatures known as tribbles are multiplying at an exponential rate, causing problems on the station and on the Enterprise.
Aye, they're into the machinery all right.
Kirk determines that the tribbles will get into the grain and finds them dead, poisoned. He determines the station aide is actually a Klingon agent who poisoned the grain so the Klingons would win development rights for the planet.
They don't like you, Mr. Darvin. I wonder why.
In the end, Scotty beams the tribbles over to the Klingon vessel, and tribbles hate Klingons.
Gave them to the Klingons. Aye, sir. Before they went into warp, I transported the whole kit and caboodle into the air engine room, where there'll be no tribble at all.
Even though the stakes involved in this conflict are high, the episode is silly, lighthearted, and never takes itself too seriously. We are treated to excitement, humor, and a happy ending. Where should I start? Probably with Kirk and Koloth.
The purpose of my presence here is to invoke shore leave rights.
Shore leave.
I love Kirk and Koloth tolerating each other as they try to be good representatives of their respective governments. They both want their officers to have shore leave, and they both want their government to obtain the planet. Kirk and Koloth do not fight. Rather, Kirk makes tribbles scream until Koloth leaves the office.
You have 6 hours to get your ship out of Federation territory.
Contrary to Kirk and Koloth trying to be good representatives of their governments, their subordinates on the station enjoying shore leave are not good representatives of their governments. The Klingon officer goes off on Kirk, calling him a tin-plated dictator with delusions of godhood.
Kirk may be a swaggering, overbearing, tin-plated dictator with delusions of godhood.
This sets off Chekhov, but Scotty holds him back. But when the Klingon insults the Enterprise, Scotty's pride and joy, even Chekhov can see that nothing will get between Mr. Scott and this loudmouth Klingon.
Mr. Scott.
This leads to a fight and the ultimate cancellation of shore leave. A major catalyst in this episode is Cyrano Jones, a man with many pockets. He gives Uhura the tribble that causes trouble on the Enterprise and sells the bartender the tribbles that cause trouble on K7. I love when the fight starts and the bartender immediately runs for help, and so Cyrano Jones takes advantage of the open bar and nods his way to a great commercial break. This episode could have easily been called Poor Kirk. Kirk cannot catch a break in the trouble with tribbles. He is irritated the entire episode, mostly on account of Nils Barris, who misuses the distress signal to lure the Enterprise to K7.
Summoning a starship on a priority A1 channel to guard some storage compartments.
Kirk is out of date when it comes to agricultural innovation.
Does everybody know about the suite but me?
Barris goes over Kirk's head and gets him into trouble.
Now that's just lovely.
Barris constantly pesters Kirk for matters Kirk has already seen to.
Mr. Barris, I have guards around the grain. I have guards around the Klingons.
Kirk grants shore leave but is forced to cancel because the man he ordered to keep the peace started a fight. Then he learns that Scotty did not defend the insults spewed by the Klingon at his captain. Kirk cannot sit down on his bridge. His authority is constantly usurped by everyone in this episode, including a Tribble. Kirk cannot eat lunch.
This is my chicken sandwich and coffee.
Kirk is able to ascertain that the Tribbles are going to get into the grain, but when he gets there, Kirk receives the final insult. Buried in a tomb of dead and live Tribbles. Barris plans to put Kirk before a board of inquiry.
And when they do, they will have a board of inquiry and they will roast you alive.
The Klingons demand an apology from Kirk.
I expect you to assume full responsibility for the persecution of Klingon nationals in this quadrant.
An apology.
And even his senior officers will not tell Kirk where the Tribbles ended up before his blood finally boils over.
Where?
Thankfully, Kirk is able to use the Tribbles to expose Darwin and send the Klingons fleeing, thus aiding Barris and the Sherman's Planet project. This episode has a wonderful ending in which Scotty sends the Tribbles aboard the Klingon vessel, which, as we learn in Trials and Tribulations, unfortunately dooms the Tribbles to be obliterated by the Klingon Empire.
Hundreds of warriors were sent to track them down throughout the galaxy. An armada obliterated the Tribble homeworld.
But in this episode, it's fun and funny for the crew, and it's fun and funny for us. A perfect ending to a perfect episode.
I don't see any Tribbles around here.
So these are my 5 favorite episodes of Star Trek, the original series.
I think of this project as very important.
Are there other great episodes of Star Trek? Absolutely. Are they my 5 favorite episodes? No, they're not. These are my 5 favorite episodes. I could watch these episodes more than any other episode of Star Trek.
Yes, incredible.
So again, I'm Rodney Donahue, and thanks for watching my 5 favorite episodes of Star Trek TOS.
Blast away, Captain. Can. You think I'm fool enough to give you a charged phaser?
I'm going to count to 3.
Yeah. Like you did with Takagi. Oops. No bullets.